Hello and welcome into episode 3 of the Book It podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're an event or equipment rental business owner, part of the management team, or just an enthusiast of all things equipment and event rental, you found your way to the right place at the right time and the right moment. Today, we're going to be talking about hiring. In our last episode, I talked a little bit about hiring as it shows up on the P&L. And for me, that was motivation to give you a snapshot of my hiring blueprint. So you're in for a treat today. We're going to be talking about just the very first step in what I do in a business to help them identify how to hire great part-time and or seasonal workers. I have so much content as it relates to hiring. I have a full blueprint of how to set up your full hiring system. Today, we're just going to be talking about one thing, and don't worry, because we're going to be talking about plenty of those other things in that system on down the road in the weeks and months to come. So without further ado, let's dive in together, and we're going to be talking about the very first part of the hiring system, which is, who should I hire? It's a great question. Who should you hire? Really, who should you hire? Do you know who you should be hiring in your business on a part-time and or seasonal basis? What does that individual look like? Where do they come from? How do you know that person when you see them? How are you evaluating to find that person? Now, I know you're thinking, Brendan, if they have a pulse and they have blood pumping through their veins, that is my ideal person. And I'm here to tell you that we both know that that's not true. That is not your ideal person, because your ideal person does exist. You just might have a hard time finding them. Now, let me share with you one of the things that I hear happen most often. I'll talk to a business owner and they say, Brendan, I don't think you understand the market around here. Good help is hard to find. Okay, and? Well, I mean, it's hard to find. They're not pumping out the youth like they used to. Okay, and? Well, they're not applying. Okay, they're not applying, or they are applying, and that's the problem. Well, when they do apply, they show up and they just don't look the part. Well, what is the part? What is the part that you need them to? Well, just kind of put together or something. The further we go through that practice, the more we start to realize that we're running our hiring off of intuition and feeling and not off of facts and a process. And that's ultimately what we want to get to. Because your ideal hires do exist, or at least insofar as they can exist within this business. Now, what is an ideal hire? Well, someone that shows up reliably on time when they say they're going to show up. Someone that communicates well. Someone that when the going gets tough, they're going to stick with it. They have a certain amount of grit. What else? What else is going to work for you in your business? I want you to draft a list of 3 to 5 values or capacities that you need this individual to have. And we're going to build the rest of your system off of that. Now, let's take another step back from this. We've talked about one aspect of who they are, but there are other aspects. I'll give you an example. Where are they at this time in their life? Is this person young, middle-aged, old? You might even say a combination of all three. Okay. Well, it's very important because each of those who's might look a little bit different. The who you might find that's young may not have as lengthy of a work history. So who you are looking for is going to look different for a youth than it is for someone who's middle-aged. Someone who's middle-aged, that you're looking for might be someone that's already gainfully employed elsewhere and they have a long history with that company and they're looking for part-time work. The who that it might be when they're younger might be someone that's college educated. They might be in college at that moment. They might be in a trade school. The who that they are matters. Someone that's a little bit older, you also might ask who this individual is. Have they hopped from job to job? Is that the who that you're looking for? Because I will tell you, after doing this myself and running hundreds of interviews across a bunch of different businesses and talking to a lot of business owners, what I find is they're absolutely looking for the job hopper. Well, why? Because in their mind, they think the job hopper is the safe bet because they'll take any job and they have zero respect for the own jobs that they're hiring for. And they think that this is an individual that will just put up with what they have to offer. And they're more likely to stick around and be okay with seasonality and seasonal hours and not getting as much work. And I have to tell you, that is one who that you can hire. And I'm not going to tell you not to hire that individual, but you also need to hire other types of who's. So let me give you a few examples. As I'm going through these examples, I'm going to be talking about someone's why. Why are they looking for this job? Because the who and the why go together. I've interviewed hundreds of people across my time in a number of different businesses. And when I've hired people, particularly for part-time and seasonal roles, the why is very important. Why are you looking for work? Now, I interviewed one gentleman, and he was very intentionally trying to save money to purchase an engagement ring for his girlfriend. That's a pretty interesting why. Not only is that an interesting why, that's an interesting why that also leads into how can I effectively manage this person once they're on my staff? What are the things that I can do to relate to them? I'm a married man myself. I understand what it looks like to ask someone to marry me. I understand what it looks like to dig and to scrape to get the funds and the nervousness and the planning and then, the dreaming of what lies ahead. I can relate to that. I can coach and manage a person in that same way by relating to them. So the ways that I might check in with them, the way that I might help motivate them even further is to continuously check in on their why. How far along are you in getting those funds together? And I'm at 30% of my goal. That's awesome. That's really cool. Does she have any idea? No, I don't think so. Okay. And have you talked to her father? We're supposed to connect next month. I'm kind of nervous. Don't really know what to do. I feel ya. When I asked my wife's father, he made me wait for 3 days before he came back to me for a follow-up discussion. I was nervous the whole time. So that's just a way that we can help relate to people. Business is human to human. We absolutely cannot forget that. We're hiring people, we're hiring human beings. We have to relate to them. Part of that is understanding their why, so we know who they are, what motivates them, to make sure that they're reliable, to make sure they have the grit, to make sure that no matter what the challenges that we throw at them, they're the type of person that just says, yes. I hired another individual, and for him, it was getting enough funds together to make a down payment on his and his wife's dream home. That's also a pretty good why. Another guy that I hired just wanted to stay active. That's it. That's all he wanted to do. Very active guy, wanted to make sure that he didn't have idle hands. And instead of going to the gym and paying a membership, he wanted to come to our gym, which was, heavy physical labor, and get paid decent money to go see some sites and go hang out with some people, to maybe meet some new people and make some friends. Not a bad thing. So that's a why that I can absolutely work with. I had another gentleman, he moved back into town after about 8 years of being out of state. Moved back in with his parents. He was really struggling to find a job. And he said, I'm just looking for full-time work. I didn't have full-time work, but I knew that he would take anything that I were to give him. And I knew that if we gave him a good, solid environment that he enjoyed coming back to, that when he did find that job, he would stick with us. And so I told him, come work with us. As you're interviewing and applying, put me down as a reference, have them call me. I will do everything I can to help you get a job. If you have an interview at a time that you otherwise have a shift, obviously do your best to try not to, double schedule. If that happens to happen, let me know. We'll absolutely work something out. Now, what I've communicated to him is why matters to me. And even though seemingly on the surface, your why has nothing to do with what I need, I could absolutely make that make sense from a business standpoint, because I know what he's thinking in his mind is, I'm going to drop this place as soon as I find a full-time gig. And what I told him in the interview was, you want to know what a lot of people that work with us do? They have a full-time job and they come and work for us on the evenings and on the weekends because we do a lot of work on the evenings and on the weekends. So if you were to find something that was basic hours, Monday through Friday, we would be more than happy to keep you around once you find that new job. Now I've taken away all the ambiguity. Once I find a new job, they're not going to want me to work with them. No. We want you to stick with us. We want you to stay with us. If you're a good quality person, continue to work with us. There is a future here that even you did not know when you walked in. You were looking for just anything. And what I'm telling you is, your why, I just need to find full-time employment. I need to pay my bills. I need to get out on my own again, not be with my parents. There's a way for that. Let us be a part of that story. That's why that matters. Who are the people that you're searching for? Do you know what their story is? I know what you're thinking, man, that's a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Well, step back for a minute, because sometimes as a business owner, we forget what it's like to be an employee. And one of the basic core tenets of any individual is they want to be known. They want someone to know what their experience, know what they're going through, and they want someone to fight for that. They want them to advocate for that. They want to be seen for what that is. your most introverted and your most extroverted person. One of them might say it, the other person may never say it, but that's what we all crave and desire as human beings. And if we can get to the heart of their why are you working here? We can tap into that, use that to motivate people, to connect with them, and to build something beautiful, a culture that people actually want to show up and be engaged with. So when I hire someone, I'm looking for what is their life situation? What are their goals? How can I help them in their journey? How can I take my business's why and purpose and connect it to their own? And if I cannot connect that, then perhaps there's not a path forward in partnering together. If someone doesn't have a strong why, I don't really know why I want another job. I don't really know what I would do with that other money. I just kind of go where the money goes. You're going to find a weak resolve within some people. And if they're showing up with the best version of themselves and that person screams weak resolve, they're not going to show up. As we're looking at the type of person, what we want to do is something very similar to what our marketing teams do. A marketing team is going to identify a persona or an ideal client profile, and they're going to market to that very particular person. So we'll get into this in future videos, but we're going to want to do the same thing. When we know the who, it could be the young student or the person that just hasn't been given enough responsibility yet. They're looking for a place to prove themselves, to grow, to learn. The way that we attract that person and measure that person and the questions that we ask are going to be far different than the questions we're going to ask to someone in a different life situation. And that doesn't have to do with just age. It could be any number of things, but we have to figure out their why. Before we end, I want to extrapolate a little bit on why we're so focused on the who, because the who is going to tell us the where. Where do I find this ideal person? There are certain places that I could look, but that's not going to yield the type of person that I want and need in my business. So when I know the who, I know where to look. If I know the who, I know what to ask them. So one of the things that we're going to talk about when we talk about the actual interview process is we're not going to ask the same basic boring questions that you hear in a lot of interviews. We're going to dive really deep. And when we know the who, we know what type of questions to ask and we know what we're looking for. There's a type of person that is successful in our business. I'm going to be asking you some questions to gauge that. There's no right or wrong answers. I just need you to be honest. What's interesting is when you tell people, I just need you to be honest, by and large, research shows people will be honest. So that's exactly what we're looking for. We want the person that shows up in the interview, we want to figure out the who that they are, the why that they operate, and we figure out where they're at so we can bring in the right who, and we figure out what to ask them because we've already learned who they are. So how do you run your hiring program? Do you know who you're looking for? Do you know why you're looking for that who? If you do, drop something in a comment. If you've liked what we've discussed here today, subscribe, like, share, do all those other things depending on whatever platform it is that you're on. And most of all, stay tuned for our very next episode. I'm excited to continue talking about things that impact event and equipment rental business owners throughout the United States and beyond. If that's you, we'll be back on the Book It podcast. Thank you.